My sister-in-law changed my daughter into costumes under red lights while documenting her progress, and when I asked why so many kids broke down in her care, she coldly said, "Because some children aren't strong enough to be remembered." That was 9 months ago. Last week she broke down in court the moment my daughter entered holding a therapy doll. You think you know someone, especially family, especially when they're the beloved angel of the community. But I learned a horrifying truth. That angel had a darkness, a secret operation built on the broken trust of innocent children, and my own daughter was about to become her next victim. My sister-in-law, Linda, ran the most beloved daycare in 3 whole counties. She'd been our family's childcare hero ever since she married my brother. I trusted her like everyone did. Her online reviews were pristine, her experience unmatched, 20 years of it. But then, 3 years ago, something just felt off. My nephew, Jake, who was in her care at the time, developed severe behavioral problems practically overnight. It was Linda who called my sister, full of concern, immediately recommending a child psychologist. At first I just thought, kids go through phases, right? But less than 24 hours after Jake's diagnosis, Linda started posting about child psychology courses she was taking. Struck me as weird. Even weirder, Jake had always been the happiest kid I knew, always laughing, always playing. When I mentioned this to Linda, her face went utterly cold. "What are you implying?" she snapped. "That I somehow caused a 4-year-old's mental breakdown?" I laughed it off, mumbled something about phases, but deep down, an awful heavy gut feeling settled in my chest. 2 weeks later, Linda showed up with expensive new camera equipment for her daycare, claiming she'd gotten a grant for educational documentation. Then, 10 months later, my cousin Rachel's daughter, Emma, started having night terrors after attending Linda's daycare. As soon as Rachel broke the news, my insides turned to lead. Emma, the most well-adjusted, confident kid in our family. Rachel constantly bragged about her in our family group chat. But when I went to Linda to talk about Emma, she seemed genuinely concerned, her Facebook feed full of articles about childhood trauma. She muttered something about kids developing problems out of nowhere, but she couldn't even look me in the eye when she said it. That same month, she opened a second daycare location. Her income was about the same as mine. It just didn't add up. Then came my friend Jane's son, Michael. Within 3 weeks at Linda's, he went from outgoing to completely withdrawn. He'd freeze whenever anyone pointed a phone at him and whisper, "Be good for the camera." Jane thought he was just camera shy. But 3 traumatized children, all while in Linda's care. That was the moment I finally broke my silence. I called my mom. "Don't you think it's weird," I asked, "that they all developed issues while with Linda?" "These things happen," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Linda is doing her best with difficult children. How dare you even suggest otherwise?" At Sunday dinner, my brother pulled me aside, his voice laced with concern. "The family's worried about you," he said. "Maybe you should talk to someone about these paranoid thoughts." Even my own husband thought I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Every incident happened during Linda's special activity time, when no other staff were present. She always insisted on one-on-one sessions, and she was always the first to recommend therapy. When Linda offered to watch my daughter Lily for free, I kept making excuses. But the family pressure was relentless. "You're being ridiculous," my mother said. "Linda provides free childcare out of love, and you reject her? What kind of person are you?" After months of relentless pressure, I finally gave in. But I had a plan. I bought tiny cameras designed for home security and painstakingly sewed them into Lily's clothing. As I handed Lily to Linda that first morning, my hands shook so hard I thought I'd drop her. The footage I retrieved that night, it made me vomit. During special activity time, Linda had taken Lily to a room with red lighting. She'd changed Lily into different outfits, positioned her in strange, unsettling poses, taking hundreds of photos while my daughter stood there, frozen, clearly scared, but too polite to protest. My hands trembled as I watched Linda upload the photos to her laptop. She sorted them into folders. Jake, Emma, Michael, dozens more I didn't recognize. I was about to call the police, but then I realized, one day might not be enough. I needed more evidence. So, hating myself for using my own daughter as bait, I sent Lily back the next day, cameras rolling. That afternoon, I forgot Lily's lunchbox and returned early. Linda didn't hear me enter. I crept to the activity room door and heard her on the phone. "The new batch is ready," she purred. "Little blonde girl, very photogenic." She laughed. "No, nothing explicit. I'm not stupid. Just enough for the collectors who pay premium. After this one, I'll have enough to retire." My phone was already recording when she continued. "The beauty is, the parents trust me completely. 20 years, hundreds of kids, and they still think behavioral changes are just phases." I backed out silently, my blood running cold, and called the police from my car. They found everything. External hard drives with thousands of photos, financial records showing payments from overseas, a client list that made even the investigators sick. But here's what haunts me. When they arrested Linda, she smiled at me. "Check your family photos from the last 5 years," she said. "Check what's in the background." I did. And in dozens of family gatherings, there she was, taking pictures of our children when we weren't looking. The police station felt surreal. I sat in a small interview room, watching detectives review the footage I'd captured. One of them, Detective Cole, kept shaking his head as Linda's chilling voice played through the speakers. The evidence was overwhelming. Within hours, they had a warrant. I waited in my car outside Linda's daycare, Lily safely with my mother, as police vehicles swarmed the building. Parents arrived for pickup, confused, then horrified by the scene. Officers emerged, carrying boxes of hard drives, computers, and filing cabinets. Linda walked out in handcuffs, head held high, that same unsettling smile fixed on her face. She spotted me across the parking lot and mouthed something I couldn't make out. Immediately, my phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "What have you done?" By evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Family members called, one after another, their voices ranging from confused to furious. My mother's call was the worst. "The police just left," she said, her voice ice cold. "They're saying horrible things about Linda. This is your doing, isn't it? Your paranoid fantasies have gone too far." I tried to explain about the evidence, the footage, Linda's own words. She cut me off. "Linda called me from jail. She told me everything. How you've been stalking her, planting cameras, fabricating evidence because you're jealous of her success. She's hiring a lawyer. She's going to sue you for everything." The line went dead. My brother arrived at my house an hour later, pounding on the door. My husband answered while I stayed in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. I could hear their voices rising in the entryway. "She needs help," my brother insisted. "Professional help. Linda's been nothing but loving to this family, and now she's sitting in jail because of my sister's delusions." "You haven't seen the evidence," my husband replied, but even his voice carried doubt. My brother pushed past him into the kitchen, his face red, fists clenched. 20 years she's cared for our children. 20 years of perfect service, and you destroy her life in one day? What kind of monster are you?" I pulled out my phone, tried to show him the footage. He knocked it from my hand. "Doctored videos. Linda already told us you've been learning video editing. She saw the software on your computer last month when she visited." That was a lie. I'd never edited a video in my life, but I could see in his eyes that he believed her completely. The next morning, Linda made bail. Someone in our extended family had put up their house as collateral. She was released with conditions: no contact with children, surrender of her passport, regular check-ins. But she was free. The family group chat exploded. Cousins, aunts, uncles all taking sides. Most sided with Linda. She'd been calling them from jail, spinning her story. I was the jealous sister-in-law, having a breakdown, planting evidence. Rachel, bless her heart, was one of the few who remained neutral. She called me privately. "I don't know what to believe," she admitted, "but Emma's been having nightmares about cameras since she left Linda's care. She won't tell me why." "The police have the evidence," I told her. "They'll prove everything." "Linda says," Rachel hesitated, "you have connections in the police department, that you're manipulating them too." Even Rachel, whose daughter had suffered, was starting to doubt. Linda worked fast. Within days, she'd hired not just one lawyer but a whole team. They filed motions claiming illegal surveillance, evidence tampering, defamation. She gave an interview to a local parenting blog, painting herself as a victim of a vindictive relative's mental health crisis. One night, my husband found me crying in Lily's room, watching our daughter sleep. Maybe you should talk to someone, he suggested gently, just to help process all this stress. You think I'm crazy too? I asked. He didn't deny it. The isolation was suffocating. Family dinners happened without us. Birthday parties we weren't invited to. My mother stopped returning my calls entirely. Only my father occasionally texted, asking if I was feeling better. Then Linda escalated. I was grocery shopping when I noticed her. 3 aisles over, pretending to examine produce. When I moved to the next aisle, she followed, always staying just within legal distance, technically not violating her bail conditions. She did this everywhere. The park where I took Lily, the coffee shop I frequented. Always watching. Always smiling that knowing smile. She never approached, never spoke, just watched. She's stalking me, I told Detective Cole during one of our meetings. Has she made contact? Threatened you? He asked. No, but... Then she's just shopping, visiting public places. Nothing illegal about that. Linda was too smart to violate her bail conditions outright, but her presence was a constant, chilling reminder. She was free and she was angry. The whisper campaign intensified. Parents from her daycare began approaching me at school pickup, defending her. One mother cornered me in the parking lot. My son attended Linda's daycare for 3 years, she said. He's perfectly fine. Whatever vendetta you have against her. Using fake evidence to destroy a good woman is disgusting. I wanted to scream that the evidence was real, that dozens of children had been victims, but I could see the certainty in her eyes. Linda had gotten to her first. My husband started working late, avoiding the tension at home. Lily asked why we didn't visit Grandma anymore, why Uncle James didn't come over. I had no good answers. One evening while I was cooking dinner, Lily mentioned something that made my blood freeze. Mommy, Aunt Linda called today. I spun around. What? When? When I was playing in the backyard. She was by the fence. She said she misses me. My hands shook as I knelt beside my daughter. What else did she say? She said, your mommy is sick and confused, that she forgives her, and that I should tell Grandma I miss her. Linda had found a way around her bail conditions. Technically, Lily had been in our yard. Linda had been on the public sidewalk. No law broken. But the message was clear. She could still reach my daughter. I installed more cameras, changed our routines, kept Lily inside, but I couldn't watch her every second and Linda knew it. The evidence that should have protected us became a weapon against us. Linda's lawyers filed motion after motion, claiming the surveillance was illegal, that I'd violated privacy laws by recording in her daycare without consent. They demanded the evidence be thrown out. Don't worry, Detective Cole assured me. We have warrants for everything. The evidence is solid. But I could see the concern in his eyes. Linda's legal team was expensive, experienced. They were finding every possible loophole. My family's pressure intensified. My brother started showing up unannounced, demanding I drop the charges, admit I was wrong. My mother sent letters through my father, filled with printed articles about false memory syndrome, about jealousy between sisters-in-law. Even worse were the flying monkeys, family friends who'd known us for years, all convinced I was having a breakdown. They'd show up with casseroles and concerned faces, gently suggesting therapy, medication. Hell, Linda's worried about you, one old family friend said. Even after everything, she just wants you to get better. The gaslighting was masterful. Linda had turned my family into weapons against me, all while maintaining her image as the victim. Then came the night I found my husband in his office, looking at apartments on his laptop. Just in case, he said when I confronted him. If things get worse, I have to think about what's best for Lily. The threat was implicit. If I didn't back down, I might lose everything. My family. My husband. Maybe even my daughter. But I had the evidence. I had the truth. And somewhere out there were dozens of children whose parents didn't even know they'd been victims. I couldn't give up. The next morning I woke to find my car tires slashed. No cameras had caught the perpetrator. The police took a report, but without evidence there was nothing they could do. Could be random vandalism, the officer suggested, though we both knew better. Linda was escalating but staying just within legal boundaries. She was showing me what she was capable of, how far her reach extended. My family, my community, maybe even some of the local authorities. She'd influenced them all. As I watched the tow truck take my car away, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Drop the charges. I deleted it immediately, knowing it couldn't be traced back to Linda. She was too careful for that. But I wasn't backing down. Not when I'd seen those folders full of children's photos. Not when I knew what she'd done to Jake, Emma, Michael, and so many others. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mommy, why does everyone think you're lying?" I smoothed her hair, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes people believe what's easier to believe, sweetheart. But the truth always comes out eventually. Will Grandma love us again when she knows the truth?" "I hope so, baby," I whispered. "I hope so." As I closed her door, I heard a car idling outside. Through the window, I could see a familiar silhouette in the driver's seat. Linda. Watching. Always watching. The war for my family's soul had begun, and Linda had drawn first blood. But I had something she didn't expect. Determination born from a mother's need to protect not just her own child, but all the children she'd hurt. The morning brought no relief. I woke to find Linda's car gone, but the damage was already spreading through our community like poison. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when I walked by. Parents at Lily's school pickup line turned their backs. The isolation pressed in from all sides. Detective Cole called with an update that made my stomach drop. Linda's lawyers had filed an emergency motion to suppress the evidence, claiming the hidden cameras violated state privacy laws. The hearing was scheduled for next week. He tried to reassure me that the warrant would protect the evidence, but his voice lacked conviction. I spent the afternoon organizing my documentation, creating backup copies of everything. The footage, the audio recording, screenshots of Linda's social media posts, timelines of the children's behavioral changes. I uploaded everything to multiple cloud services, emailed copies to myself, even mailed a USB drive to my old college roommate 3 states away. My husband came home early, his face drawn with exhaustion. He set his briefcase down carefully, avoiding eye contact. The conversation that followed was brief but devastating. His law firm was receiving calls about my mental state. Partners were asking questions. His career was being affected. I showed him the evidence again, frame by frame. Linda positioning Lily, the folders with children's names, the phone conversation about collectors and payments. He watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When it finished, he rubbed his temples and admitted he didn't know what to believe anymore. The family pressure was relentless. His own parents were calling, worried about their granddaughter being caught up in my delusions. He needed space to think. That night, he slept in the guest room. The next day brought a new crisis. Rachel called, her voice shaking. Emma had finally told her about the photo games at Aunt Linda's house. The red room, the dress-up clothes, the man behind the camera who Linda said was making a special book. My hands trembled as Rachel described Emma's breakdown. The child had been carrying the secret for months, too scared to tell anyone because Linda said it was their special secret. Rachel was taking Emma to a child psychologist that afternoon. I urged Rachel to contact Detective Cole immediately. She promised she would, but I could hear the fear in her voice. Fear of what this meant. Fear of facing the truth. Fear of going against the family. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my mother screaming. Rachel had called her first, and now my mother was convinced I had coached Emma to lie, that I had somehow planted false memories in a child I hadn't seen in weeks. The accusations grew more wild, more desperate, as she tried to protect the image of Linda she'd held for 20 years. I hung up on her mid-sentence. Linda's next move was calculated and cruel. She showed up at Lily's school during recess, standing just beyond the fence line where she could watch the children play. Technically on public property, technically within her bail conditions. The school called me immediately. I raced there, finding her still standing by the fence, that serene smile fixed on her face. She didn't acknowledge me, just kept watching the playground. Other parents were starting to notice, whispering among themselves. I heard fragments of their conversations. They thought I was the unstable one, stalking Linda at the school. The principal emerged, asking both of us to leave. The look she gave me was full of pity and concern. Linda walked away first, unhurried, knowing she'd won this round. That afternoon, Child Protective Services knocked on my door. Someone had made an anonymous report about my mental state and fitness as a parent. The caseworker was professional but thorough, asking about my support system, my mental health history, any medications I was taking. She observed my interaction with Lily, took notes on our living conditions. I knew who had called them. Linda's manipulation was masterful, using the very systems meant to protect children as weapons against me. The caseworker found no immediate concerns, but said they'd need to do follow-up visits. The case would remain open, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Another sword hanging over my head. My husband returned home to find me in Lily's room, organizing her clothes with shaking hands. He'd heard about the CPS visit from my brother, who'd called him at work. The conversation was brief. He was taking Lily to stay with his parents for a few days, just until things calmed down. I wanted to fight, to scream that separating us was exactly what Linda wanted. But I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear that our daughter might be taken away entirely if CPS found our home environment unstable. So I helped pack Lily's bag, kissed her goodbye, and watched them drive away. The house felt tomb-like without them. That evening, I discovered Linda's latest tactic. A blog post on a popular parenting site, written by a concerned community member, detailed the tragic situation of a beloved daycare owner being persecuted by a mentally unstable relative. No names were mentioned, but the details were specific enough that anyone in our area would know exactly who it was about. The comments section was brutal. Strangers calling for investigations into false accusers. Parents sharing how much they loved this unnamed daycare owner, and how she'd helped their children. A few even suggested legal action against anyone who would try to destroy such a pillar of the community. I screenshot everything, adding it to my growing file of Linda's campaign against me. Detective Cole called with mixed news. Rachel had brought Emma in, and the child's testimony was compelling, but Linda's lawyers were already working to discredit it, claiming I had influenced the family, that Emma's memories were contaminated. They'd hired an expert witness on false memory syndrome. Worse, some of the overseas financial records were proving difficult to verify. The payments had been carefully laundered through multiple cryptocurrency exchanges. Without Linda's cooperation, tracing the money would take months, maybe years. The physical evidence was solid, he assured me. The photos, the folders, the recorded confession. But Linda's legal team was fighting to exclude each piece, finding technicalities, challenging chain of custody, questioning the legality of my recordings. I spent that night alone, poring over family photos from the past 5 years. Linda had been telling the truth about one thing. She was there in the background of so many pictures. Birthday parties, holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, always with a camera or phone, always focused on the children. How many victims were there? How many parents had no idea their children's photos were being sold to collectors overseas? The scope of it made me physically ill. The next morning brought another blow. My brother had convinced our father to freeze my access to the family emergency fund, money our grandparents had left for all their grandchildren's education. He claimed I might use it for irrational legal pursuits against Linda. I was being systematically cut off from every support system I had. But Linda made her first real mistake that afternoon. She approached Jane at the grocery store asking about Michael, wondering how he was doing, if he ever talked about his time at daycare. Jane, already suspicious because of our previous conversations, recorded the encounter on her phone. Linda was fishing for information, trying to determine if Michael had said anything incriminating. Her questions were too specific, too focused on particular activities and photo sessions. Jane played dumb but captured every word. She brought the recording to me that evening. We sat in my empty kitchen, listening to Linda's carefully crafted questions. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it showed consciousness of guilt. Linda was worried about what Michael might remember. Jane agreed to take the recording to Detective Cole. More importantly, she believed me. Having one ally made the isolation slightly more bearable. The emergency hearing arrived faster than expected. I sat in the courthouse hallway, watching Linda arrive with her team of lawyers. She wore a conservative suit, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the persecuted childcare professional. My mother sat beside her, holding her hand. My brother stood protectively nearby. Other family members filled the benches. They'd all come to support Linda. I sat alone on the opposite side until Rachel arrived. She slipped in beside me, squeezing my hand. She didn't say anything, but her presence meant everything. Emma's testimony had changed her perspective entirely. The hearing was technical, focused solely on the admissibility of evidence. Linda's lawyers argued that the hidden cameras were illegal, that I'd violated privacy laws by recording in her business without consent. They painted me as a vigilante who'd broken multiple laws in pursuit of a vendetta. The prosecutor countered that the recordings were justified given the nature of the suspected crimes, that children's safety superseded privacy concerns. The judge listened impassively, occasionally asking for clarification. During a recess, Linda passed me in the hallway. She leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. She reminded me that Lily was a beautiful child, that accidents could happen anywhere, that sometimes custody arrangements needed to be reconsidered when a parent was unstable. The threat was subtle but clear. Back off or risk losing my daughter permanently. The judge's ruling came down split. Some evidence would be admitted, but several key pieces were excluded due to the way they'd been obtained. The case could move forward but weakened. Linda's lawyers smiled. They'd won a significant victory. I drove home in a daze, finding my husband's car in the driveway. He was packing more of his things. The hearing result had convinced him that I'd acted irrationally, illegally. His parents' lawyers were recommending he establish separate residences to protect his custody rights. We argued, voices raised for the first time in our marriage. I begged him to look at the evidence that remained, to trust what he'd seen with his own eyes. But the family pressure, the legal complications, the social isolation, it was all too much. He left with another suitcase. The divorce papers would come later, he said. That night I sat in Lily's empty room, surrounded by the weight of what fighting Linda had cost me. My family, my marriage, my reputation, daily access to my daughter. Everything was crumbling. But then I thought about Jake, Emma, Michael, and all the unknown children in those folders. Children whose parents still didn't know what had happened. Children who might still be suffering in silence. I couldn't stop. Not now. The next phase required a different approach. If the legal system was being manipulated, if my family was being used against me, then I needed to find parents who would listen. Parents whose children had attended Linda's daycare over the years. I started with social media, creating an anonymous account. I posted in local parenting groups, asking if anyone had noticed behavioral changes in children who'd attended a certain daycare. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of parents replied privately. Their children had become withdrawn, camera-shy, secretive about special activities. Many had attributed it to normal childhood phases. But when they saw others reporting the same patterns, the pieces started falling into place. One mother, Catherine, was particularly vocal. Her son had attended Linda's daycare 5 years ago. He still had panic attacks when photographed. She'd always wondered why, but never connected it to his time in daycare. We began building a network. Parents comparing notes, timelines, behavioral changes. The pattern was undeniable. Linda had been doing this for years, selecting certain children, traumatizing them during special photo sessions, then gaslighting parents about the behavioral changes. But we needed more than suspicions. We needed evidence that couldn't be suppressed or excluded. Catherine remembered something crucial. 5 years ago, Linda had given her a CD of daycare memories when her son graduated to kindergarten. She'd never looked at it, just stored it away. She retrieved it from her attic and brought it to my house. We loaded the disc with trembling hands. It contained hundreds of photos from various daycare events. But in the metadata, in the background of certain images, we found what we were looking for. Glimpses of the red room, children in dress-up clothes looking uncomfortable, and in one image, partially visible in a reflection, camera equipment far too professional for simple daycare documentation. More parents came forward with similar CDs. Linda had been careless, including images she shouldn't have in these memory collections. Each disc provided more pieces of the puzzle. Detective Cole was excited by this development. Evidence given freely by Linda herself couldn't be suppressed. The metadata showed dates, times, camera specifications, technical details that corroborated the timeline we'd established. But Linda wasn't sitting idle. The whisper campaign intensified. Parents who joined our network started receiving anonymous threats. Their other children were rejected from activities. Their businesses received negative reviews. The message was clear. Support me and suffer the consequences. Some parents backed away, too frightened to continue. Others grew more determined. Catherine especially refused to be intimidated. Her son deserved justice. She said all the children did. We met in secret, sharing information, building our case. Rachel attended every meeting, bringing Emma's therapist notes that documented the child's trauma. Jane contributed Michael's therapy records. Slowly, painstakingly, we assembled proof that couldn't be dismissed as one person's vendetta. Linda's mistakes multiplied under pressure. She approached too many people, asked too many questions, left too many digital footprints. Her carefully maintained facade was cracking. Then came the breakthrough we needed. One of the parents, Margaret, worked in IT. She analyzed the metadata from Linda's CDs more thoroughly and discovered something shocking. The high-end camera equipment Linda used encoded GPS coordinates in every photo. Most were taken at the daycare as expected, but dozens showed coordinates for a residential address across town. Margaret cross-referenced the dates with daycare attendance records. The photos at the unknown address were all taken during field trips that parents had never been informed about. Detective Cole obtained a warrant for the address. It was a rental property leased under a fake name, but paid for through an account linked to Linda. What they found inside made even veteran officers sick. A professional photography studio. Thousands of printed photos organized by child and date. Computer equipment with encrypted drives and records. Detailed records of which photos had been sold to which buyers, carefully coded but decipherable. The evidence was overwhelming and legally obtained. Linda was arrested again, this time with charges that would ensure no bail. The arrest happened at my mother's house, where Linda had been staying. I wasn't there, but Rachel called me immediately. My mother had collapsed, finally faced with undeniable proof of what Linda was. My brother stood in the driveway staring at nothing, his world completely shattered. The family that had united against me was now forced to confront the truth they'd worked so hard to deny. But Linda had one more card to play. From jail, she had her lawyers release a statement. She claimed I had planted the evidence at the rental property, that I had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up, that the real perpetrator was still out there while an innocent woman sat in jail. Some people believed her. The divide in our community deepened. Those who'd seen the evidence supported me. Those who couldn't accept that they'd been fooled clung to Linda's innocence. The legal proceedings dragged on. More victims came forward. The cryptocurrency trails were slowly unraveled, revealing buyers in multiple countries. The scope of Linda's operation shocked everyone. 20 years, hundreds of children, millions in profits. My husband filed for divorce, custody papers attached. He couldn't move past his role in doubting me, couldn't forgive himself for taking Lily away when I'd needed them most. The marriage was another casualty of Linda's manipulation. But something unexpected happened during the custody hearing. Lily, now staying with her paternal grandparents, had started having nightmares. She finally told them about Aunt Linda's photo games, about the Red Room, about being scared but too polite to say no. My in-laws, faced with their granddaughter's trauma, finally understood. They supported my custody petition. My husband, broken by the revelation that he'd failed to protect his daughter, didn't contest it. The reunion with Lily was bittersweet. She clung to me, apologizing for not telling me sooner about Aunt Linda. I held her close, assuring her none of this was her fault. We would heal together. The family reckoning was painful. My mother aged years and weeks, grappling with how she defended a predator while abandoning her own daughter. My brother sought therapy, unable to process how he'd lived with Linda for years without seeing the truth. Some relationships would never recover. Trust, once shattered, was difficult to rebuild. But Rachel stood by me, as did the network of parents we'd built. We supported each other through the legal proceedings, the therapy sessions, the long journey toward healing. Linda's trial date was set. The evidence was insurmountable. Her legal team reduced to delay tactics and technicalities. But I knew the real victory wasn't in her conviction. It was in the children who were now safe. The parents who now knew the truth. The future victims who would be spared. As I tucked Lily into bed in our quiet house, she asked if the bad people always got caught. I chose my words carefully, explaining that sometimes it took time, but truth had a way of surfacing. That speaking up, even when people didn't believe you, was always the right thing to do. She nodded solemnly, then asked if we could visit Grandma soon. Maybe, I said, when everyone had done some healing, when trust could begin to rebuild. The war for my family's soul was far from over. The scars Linda left would take years to heal. But as I watched my daughter sleep peacefully, no longer afraid of cameras or special activities, I knew every loss had been worth it. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Legal proceedings, therapy appointments, difficult conversations with family members ready to reconcile. The work of rebuilding a life that Linda had tried to destroy. But tonight, my daughter was safe in her own bed. Other children were protected from harm. The truth, painful as it was, had finally emerged. Linda thought she could manipulate everyone forever. She thought her careful facade would never crack. She thought wrong. The rental property discovery changed everything. Within hours of the raid, Linda's lawyer called an emergency meeting with prosecutors. I watched from across the courthouse parking lot as her legal team arrived, their confident swagger replaced by hurried steps and tense faces. Detective Cole texted me updates throughout the day. The encrypted drives had been cracked. International buyers identified. Financial records decoded. Linda's meticulous documentation had become her downfall. That evening my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice barely a whisper. She asked if I would meet her at the park where we used to take Lily. I arrived to find her sitting on a bench, looking decades older than when I'd last seen her. She handed me a box of photographs. Family gatherings, birthdays, holidays. In every one, Linda lurked in the background with her camera. My mother had spent the day going through albums, finally seeing what had been there all along. We sat in silence as she processed 20 years of deception. When she finally spoke, it was to describe finding Linda's old laptop in the guest room closet. She'd turned it over to police that morning. Another nail in Linda's coffin. My brother appeared at my door the next morning. He looked hollow, his eyes red-rimmed. He'd been reviewing home videos, he said, finding moments where Linda had isolated children during family events. The evidence had always been there. We just trusted her too much to see it. He broke down completely when he told me about finding Jake's therapy files. Years of sessions documenting trauma that started exactly when Linda began her special photo sessions. His son had tried to tell him, but Linda had convinced him the boy was troubled. The dominoes fell quickly after that. Parents who defended Linda began calling, their children finally feeling safe enough to speak. A father discovered his daughter's diary from 5 years ago detailing scary photo time at daycare. A mother found drawings her son had hidden showing a red room and a woman with a camera. Catherine organized a meeting for affected families. The community center room overflowed with parents clutching evidence they'd overlooked or dismissed. Photos their children had hidden, behavioral charts showing sudden changes, therapy notes they'd never connected to daycare. We created a timeline on the wall, marking when each child attended Linda's daycare and when their problems began. The pattern was undeniable. 20 years of systematic abuse, hidden behind a facade of loving care. Detective Cole attended the meeting, bringing news that Linda's second daycare location had been searched. More evidence recovered, more victims identified. The investigation had expanded to 3 states where Linda had previously worked. But the most shocking revelation came from Margaret's continued analysis of the metadata. She'd found evidence of a second photographer in some images. Someone else had been in that red room. The investigation suddenly had a new dimension. Linda's husband, my brother, submitted to questioning voluntarily. For hours, detectives grilled him about his knowledge of Linda's activities. He emerged shaken but cleared. The second person in the photos wasn't him. The breakthrough came when investigators matched partial fingerprints from the rental property to a man named David Chun. He'd been Linda's business partner years ago, supposedly helping with daycare administration. Parents remembered him as quiet, always in the background. Police found Chun trying to board a flight to Vietnam. His laptop contained correspondence with Linda dating back 15 years. They'd built their operation together, carefully selecting vulnerable children, grooming parents' trust, documenting everything for their overseas clients. Chen's arrest made Linda desperate. From jail, she attempted to contact several parents through her lawyer, offering information about their children's photos in exchange for character witnesses. The attempts backfired spectacularly. Parents who'd been wavering now saw her true nature. My husband filed amended custody papers, giving me full custody with his complete support. He included a letter to the judge taking responsibility for failing to protect Lily, for choosing family pressure over evidence. The divorce would proceed, but we'd work together as co-parents. Lily's therapy sessions revealed more than we'd known. Linda had photographed her multiple times, always during rest time when other staff took breaks. My daughter had been too well-mannered to refuse, too young to understand why it felt wrong. The therapist worked with Lily using play therapy, helping her process the experience without re-traumatization. Slowly, my daughter began to separate cameras from fear. Not all pictures were bad, the therapist explained. Aunt Linda had broken rules about taking photos without permission. Rachel brought Emma to joint therapy sessions with Lily. The girls found comfort in shared experience, in knowing they weren't alone. Their resilience amazed me, their ability to heal giving me hope. More families came forward daily. Linda's first daycare in another state had closed 15 years ago. Former clients emerged with similar stories. Children who'd grown up camera-shy, anxiety-ridden, unable to articulate why. The statute of limitations protected Linda from those earliest crimes, but their testimony established a pattern. The financial investigation revealed the scope of Linda's profits. Cryptocurrency wallets containing hundreds of thousands of dollars, offshore accounts in Chen's name, properties purchased with laundered money. The government seized it all, earmarking funds for victim restitution. My mother moved in temporarily, needing to be close to family while processing her guilt. She spent hours with Lily, rebuilding their relationship, showing her granddaughter that not all trust was misplaced. Their healing happened in small moments. Baking cookies, reading stories, learning to be family again. The parent network grew stronger. We met weekly, supporting each other through the legal process. Some families pursued civil suits. Others focused on healing. Catherine emerged as a natural leader, organizing resources, coordinating with prosecutors, ensuring no family faced this alone. Linda's trial date approached. Prosecutors built an airtight case with our evidence. Chen had agreed to testify against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her lawyers, recognizing the futility, began negotiating a plea deal, but Linda refused any deal admitting guilt. She maintained her innocence, claiming Chen had acted alone, that she'd been manipulated too. Even faced with overwhelming evidence, she clung to her victim narrative. The week before trial, Jane's son Michael had a breakthrough in therapy. He remembered details about other children in the Red Room, names Linda had used, descriptions that matched missing pieces in our timeline. His testimony would be crucial. My brother sold the house he'd shared with Linda. Unable to live surrounded by memories of deception, he found an apartment near Jake's therapy center, dedicating himself to his son's healing. We began rebuilding our relationship slowly, bonded by betrayal and a determination to protect our children. The school implemented new policies about unauthorized adults near playground fences. Parents volunteered for additional monitoring. What Linda had exploited, we worked to protect. Local daycare centers invited Catherine and me to speak about recognizing warning signs. We shared red flags we'd missed, the importance of trusting instincts, how predators use family connections and community standing as shields. Chen's testimony revealed the full operation. He handled the technical side, encrypting files, managing cryptocurrency, maintaining client communications. Linda selected victims, groomed families, created opportunities. They'd operated for 2 decades, believing themselves untouchable. The client list included buyers from 12 countries. International law enforcement joined the investigation. Linda's photos had fed a vast network of collectors who paid premium for artistic images of children. Nothing explicitly illegal in individual photos, but the volume and focus revealed intent. My father, quiet through the family upheaval, surprised everyone by testifying before the state legislature about daycare oversight. His measured words carried weight. Background checks weren't enough. Predators like Linda passed every official screening. The trial began on a cold Monday morning. I sat with Rachel, Catherine, and Jane in the front row. Behind us, dozens of affected families filled the courtroom. Linda entered in shackles, her careful appearance unable to hide the strain. Prosecutors presented evidence methodically, Financial records, photographs, Chen's testimony, parent after parent describing behavioral changes in their children. The defense struggled to counter facts Linda herself had documented. When prosecutors played my recording of Linda's phone call, several jurors visibly recoiled. Her casual discussion of selling children's photos, her pride in parental trust, her calculation about retirement. The woman who'd claimed manipulation sat exposed by her own words. Linda took the stand against her lawyer's advice. She spun elaborate tales of Chen's control, her ignorance of his activities, her dedication to childcare. But under cross-examination, her stories crumbled. She couldn't explain the folders on her computer, the metadata proving her camera took the photos, the financial transfers to her accounts. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 27 charges including child exploitation, money laundering, and conspiracy. Linda stood motionless as the verdict was read. That familiar smile finally gone. Sentencing brought victim impact statements. Parents described their children's trauma. Teenagers testified about years of anxiety. Rachel read Emma's letter about nightmares and fear. I spoke about Lily's healing journey and the family Linda had torn apart. The judge sentenced Linda to 45 years in federal prison. Chen received 25 years. Both would register as sex offenders. Their assets would fund victim compensation and therapy programs. As marshals led Linda away, she looked at me one last time. No smile, no defiance, just the hollow stare of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed. Outside the courthouse, families embraced. Some cried with relief, others stood quietly, processing the end of a long nightmare. Media covered the verdict, but we declined interviews. This wasn't about publicity. It was about justice and healing. The next months brought steady progress. Children continued therapy. Families rebuilt trust. The parent network evolved into a support group, meeting monthly to share resources and encouragement. What Linda had broken, we worked to repair. My mother found purpose in volunteering with child advocacy organizations. My brother became an outspoken advocate for abuse prevention. My father quietly funded therapy scholarships for affected families. We'd never be the same family, but we were building something new from the ruins. Lily started kindergarten at a new school, one without memories of Linda watching through fences. She made friends easily, her natural confidence returning. Sometimes she'd freeze when someone took photos, but those moments grew rarer. I returned to work part-time, finding balance between career and Lily's needs. Colleagues who doubted my stability now understood the truth. Some apologized. Others simply welcomed me back. I focused on moving forward. The daycare building stood empty for months before a family services nonprofit bought it. They transformed it into a child advocacy center, offering therapy, support groups, and prevention education. Linda's hunting ground became a place of healing. One evening, while tucking Lily into bed, she told me she'd helped a classmate who was scared of cameras. She'd explained that most people took pictures to remember happy times, that it was okay to say no if uncomfortable. My 5-year-old had become an advocate. Watching my daughter sleep peacefully, I reflected on the journey. The isolation and gaslighting, the family betrayal, the legal battles, the moment I'd almost given up. But also the parents who'd listened, the detective who'd believed, the evidence that couldn't be silenced. Linda had stolen innocence and trust. She'd weaponized family bonds and community standing. For 20 years she'd hidden behind a mask of caring, preying on society's reluctance to suspect a beloved figure. But she'd underestimated a mother's instinct, the power of truth, the courage of children who finally felt safe to speak, the strength found in shared purpose. Tomorrow would bring continued healing, therapy appointments, support group meetings, small victories, and occasional setbacks, the work of rebuilding lives touched by trauma. Tonight, my daughter slept safely, surrounded by people who'd fight to protect her. The photographs Linda took still existed somewhere in evidence lockers, but they'd lost their power. What remained was resilience, justice, and hope for all the tomorrows to come.